Hello, everybody. I'm Ademar Albertin. I'm product owner from EXIN, and I'll be your host for today's discussion panel about blockchain. We will be with two SMEs talking about many different aspects of blockchain. Before we start, I would like to remind you that on the chat tab located on the right bottom side of your screen, you will find important information about technical support if it's needed, the LinkedIn profile from the SMEs, so you can be connected with them as well. I also would like to let you know that the session is being recorded, and in the end of the session, we have a surprise for you. So bear with us. The EXIN portfolio provides many different certifications that are divided in 4 categories: security, compliance and risk, agile principles and culture, tech, mobile and safeness, business intelligence and processes. The blockchain program, our today's subject, is located on the tech, mobile, safeness domain, as you can see in this picture. So now, let's move forward to the discussion panel. I would like to welcome our panelists and say thank you for you to make time on your agenda to be with us. So please welcome Patrick and Tiana. Before we start, I'm going to provide a shortly introduction to the subject of today. So before we start with the questions, please, just a reminder about the blockchain history. So between 1991 and 2008, the first blockchains created by Stuart Haber and Scott Stornetta. In 2008, the book BITKOM, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, in the first to describe blockchain technology structure. It is written by Satoshi Nakamoto, that is possibly a pseudonym, with the goal of creating a peer-to-peer electronic cash system that was not reliant on a network of banks. In 2013, 1 billion is surpassed on Bitcoin marketplace, being a massive number. In 2014, crowd-sale funds Ethereum blockchain R3, the blockchain technology company, evolves from a consortium of over 40 legacy financial companies and becomes an enterprise for the implementation of blockchain technology. In 2017, Block.one unveils EOS as the new blockchain protocol decentralized applications deployment. In 2020, through the integration of AI, artificial intelligence, and the IoT, Internet of the Things, true blockchain or blockchain complete has the potential to evolve into an industry and economy-changing technology. So now let's find out how blockchain is being accepted by the industry. So first question from our panel. Could you please briefly explain to the audience how did we start on blockchain and why? Patrick.
Sure. Thanks. Thank you very much, Ademar, for having me. Hello, everyone. I'm Patrick, here from Berlin. So basically, I started reading about blockchain a couple of years ago. I was still studying economics and politics in Germany and France, and I basically was fascinated by the idea that through blockchain and especially through Bitcoin, which was my first interest, some of those huge institutions like banks and payment providers and everything could just be skipped. And basically this whole process could be done without those intermediaries. Transactions of value like Bitcoin could be done without this whole industry and without those established institutions as intermediaries. That's when I started to start reading, to watch videos, and obviously I also invested a little bit, and I did this privately for a couple of years, and then when I ended studies, I decided to join BITKOM, where I'm still working. BITKOM is basically the Association of Digital Businesses in Germany. It's the largest digital association in Europe. We have about 2,500 member companies, basically all global players, also the American tech giants, but of course it's mainly European based. And within BITKOM, I'm in charge of all the blockchain projects. So basically we're a platform between the industry and the politicians, the regulatory side, to discuss, okay, how should we respond to this blockchain development through policy in the financial sector, but also beyond that, how can we promote the technology and become, like, as Germany and as Europe, a world leader in this space, and to grasp all the opportunities this technology offers. And that's basically what we do. We write market research studies, we write papers on how to implement, on how to adopt blockchain, on the opportunities, on the risks. We discuss, of course, the financial regulatory side and how the whole crypto scene should be treated from the regulatory system. And that's basically the questions which I deal with on a daily basis with a lot of blockchain companies here from especially Germany. Most of you guys probably know that Berlin is one of the blockchain hotspots in the world, with renowned projects such as Parity, Cosmos, and others, IOTA, which are known worldwide and are driven here from Berlin. So that's a short introduction to how I got into blockchain and what I'm dealing with every day.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Tiana.
Hi guys, thank you so much for making time for listening to this conference. And please ask questions. I love questions. So regarding how I got into blockchain, basically the very beginning of it for me started in 2007. That's when the recession started, and I started having questions about how the economy worked and how money worked. The company that I work for had collapsed, and all the rules that I thought about how the economy worked and money worked just didn't work anymore. I later went to Argentina and was trying to get money from the United States and take it down to Argentina and vice versa, because I was selling nice leather handbags and building websites and things like that, just making things happen in your early 20s, right? And that's when I started coming across things like Bitcoin and Ripple, where people were talking about basically grassroots efforts to move money faster in a way that everybody could trust, because people had stopped trusting financial institutions and governments. And I just became totally fascinated with it because it just didn't work the way that I thought money should work. And so just kept on reading about it for a long time. And then a friend of mine reached out to me and asked if I would help. He had a hardware company that had developed special chips for mining Bitcoin. And I was like, oh yes, this is totally up my alley. I love this. So we started selling those, and it was insane. I thought it was just like a niche of weirdos that liked this technology, but within 6 months, we had sold over $50 million of product, which are these specialized mining rigs, and with almost no ad budget as well. We spent, I think, $60,000 doing advertisement, which if anybody works in marketing and sales would understand that that's pretty insane. And so I found myself, instead of just standing on the sidelines within this ecosystem, I started mining Bitcoin and joining mining pools. And it was so complicated for somebody that wasn't, like, I'm not a computer science person by training. I'm more of a self-taught person. And so I started writing little manuals for myself so I could remember how to connect to mining pools and to help me remember how things worked. So the very first things I started to write were just actually for myself, and then other people would ask me about it and I would share them. And then from there, I later started thinking about how these systems, like, this was a really cool thought experiment for me as somebody in the suburbs mining Bitcoin. But were there other applications for this technology? Could we switch how the algorithms worked and use that instead to do things like map stars or you know, quantum computing. Like what else could we do? Because with mining Bitcoin, it's basically burning a lot of electricity, and it's also a cannibalistic arms race where every new generation of chips have to become faster and better and cheaper in order to win the race to win Bitcoin. And so I was thinking about that, like how can we take these networks that we're building and build more interesting things. And then a couple friends and mine got together and we founded a company called Factom. And Factom started building some of the very first enterprise blockchain software. And we wanted to harness the power of these distributed networks to build secure applications for IoT devices and just about anything else. We thought of them in the context of chains, where you could prove the negative, prove if any data is getting missing from a data set. And so that was kind of what I did. And then I was approached to write a book called Blockchain for Dummies, based off of some of the articles that I'd published, just trying to educate people about the technology and the possibilities we could build with it. So it's kind of the long and short. What I do now is I keep writing for fun and pain, and I'm an angel investor. I invest primarily in software and other emerging technologies.
Thank you very much, Tiana. It's very interesting, both stories that we heard. So let's move forward for the next question. So how do you see the market and industries adopting and using blockchain? Is it something for real, or is it just a nice market trend? So Tiana.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know how to answer that question because I think certain parts that came up are clearly trends. I think like the things that happened in 2017 around initial coin offerings, ICOs, was a trend that we've seen go away. And other types of technology are just really starting to take off in amazing ways. Several governments have started really interesting initiatives and have really put a ton of capital into some projects. Specifically, like I still have some involvement with Factom, and I was talking with them recently, and they were just awarded another contract towards commercialization for the security of IoT devices. In the US, we have a big wall with Mexico, and it's a big joke, but that wall has a lot of ground sensors and cameras and other things that need to be secured. And that application can keep on growing because it's a really good use case. But other types of use cases that don't make economic sense, I think, will go away. People right now, I think, are just sort of like throwing spaghetti at a wall to see what sticks. And we're still trying to understand the economic models for this technology, and I think we're still sort of looking at it the way the internet was in the 90s, where people were just trying lots of different things as they were trying to understand how you could make new types of businesses.
Okay, Patrick, do you have something to add to this question?
I mean, not much, but what I can say, at least that market adoption is way slower than what people thought of market adoption a couple of years ago in the industry and in the crypto scene. I mean, for example, here in Germany, we did a research last year, and it's basically only between 1% and 5% of companies here in Germany which have blockchain technology adopted or are testing, piloting blockchain projects or doing proof of concepts. Most of blockchain projects are not yet in production, but are still in some test phases. So what we can say, it's way slower than we thought a couple of years ago, but of course that also depends on the size of the companies. I mean, basically from all the companies that have the resources, have the innovation budget to start some projects are basically doing it. So companies bigger than, I don't know, maybe 1,000 employees, at least here in Germany, we see that basically all of them are testing some new blockchain projects. That it depends on basically on the company size. For small and medium-sized enterprises, I would say the majority are focusing their innovation budget and their resources on other probably more tested and already more adopted new technologies. Probably investing their innovation budget first in cloud technologies and in IoT and etc. That I would say so. It really depends on the industry, on the company size and everything else. But as far as I can say, adoption is quite slow, at least here in Germany.
Okay, so then I have another question to you, Patrick. Since you are seeing the movement of the market over there in Germany, do you expected blockchain to be developed in a more public or in a more permissioned direction? How do you say this?
I think at least in the industry, it's definitely more permission systems which are currently used, which are currently in production. I mean, there are really some big private permissioned blockchain projects which are already live and working. For example, the TradeLens platform, which was developed by IBM and Maersk, which I mean is a platform underpinned by blockchain technology, and it's basically in the global shipping industry. Empowers all the different players, ships and customs and everything else, to exchange documents and to accelerate some processes through the blockchain. I would say that in the industry, especially the big corporations, are mainly, at least more than 2/3, are mainly experimenting with permissioned networks. I would say, I mean, most of the time there is some ambition to later open those permissioned networks to that's what, for example, the Libra project, which is now initiated by Facebook and others, is also saying that it's for now a permissioned network of about 100 nodes, and that later on it will get completely open and public. But for now, I would say it's a permission-driven technology.
Tiana, do you have another view on this matter?
You know, I think that both types of networks will thrive, just as we have the public internet that we all enjoy, and then companies have their own private networks. I think what we'll also see is collaborations within industries where they can start to see efficiencies by having some kind of agreed on rule set. For example, in Germany, the reinsurance industry has been using Hyperledger, and they'll probably end up building out their own, but they built a separate organization called B3I, and that has, I think, over 40 insurers and brokers that sort of like collaborate on reinsurance, and they're able to save a ton of money. I met one of their people at Stanford University speaking, and she told me the amount of money that they were able to save in paperwork costs by clearing and settling transactions collaboratively was pretty immense. And so I think other industries will be able to see this too, beyond just banking and insurance, but other like shipping and things like that, where you have multiple different parties that are located all over the world that need to basically clear and settle information between each other, and trust each other, but not totally. But in the same sense, I think that's the conversation that we're really having right now, is the difference between closed gardens and an open web. And I personally, I'm on the side of open web. I just think that it's better, but not that there isn't a place for closed gardens too.
Okay,
I think as well that I mean the disruptive potential of open permissionless networks, it's in my opinion way higher, and that's where, in my opinion, the true innovation lies. I just see it. I mean, you know, today, if we look at the data, most of, I mean, those projects which are in production are not running on like public permissionless ledgers. But of course, I mean, I'm completely with you to say that the real blockchain innovation and the real potential and the future lies in open networks. But that's not what we see so far if we look at the industry projects.
Thank you very much, you both. Now, moving forward, wow, believe me, guys, I'm a simple soul, so I do not understand much of like a blockchain. So then the question, as far as I can understand, cryptography is the core of the blockchain. How does it work? Is it secured enough? Can I trust on blockchain? What is your feeling about it? Patrick?
I mean, basically, a couple of minutes won't be enough to really explain on how some specific cryptography is used on different protocols. But basically, the core cryptography used in most of the blockchain protocols are public-private keys, which are used to you know, hide your true like your personal information on a blockchain network, and also hashing algorithms, which are basically used in order to hide a certain input, but basically show that this input is trustable. So basically, public-private key infrastructure and hashing algorithms are the basics of cryptography in blockchain. But I mean, one cannot say generally if it's secured enough or not. It really depends on the protocol. It really depends on the cryptography used. Blockchain is not, there's not one technology. As you know, there are hundreds of different blockchain technologies. The cryptography used in Bitcoin, for example, is completely different from cryptography used in Hyperledger or others. So that's really hard to tell.
Okay, Tiana, what is your view on this? Can I trust enough on the blockchain?
It's a good question. So cryptography, it's been around for a while, and most of the systems, you know, most of the internet is built on some kind of asymmetric or public key encryption. There are lots of government institutions basically help create standards around that, like NIST, the National Institute for Science and Technology. And I think the question might be coming up because of quantum computing and the idea of quantum computers just being able to unravel blockchains. But you know, NIST back in 2016 put out a call for the creation of more algorithms that would be quantum proof. And they've already, you know, they've had dozens of applications put through already, and they've been testing them. And I know that they've gotten that narrowed down to about 26 different candidates that they're going to continue to test. And so quantum computing is starting to become a reality. Google announced recently that they have quantum supremacy. And I know that IBM is also jockeying for that position as well. And so I think it's a fascinating question that we're all facing, but it's not just blockchain specific. It would basically be the underpinning, the nails and glue that allow the internet to work. will that still work in the future? And I think that there's enough people that are determined to make sure that we can securely transmit information, that we'll figure it out before we have to deal with that problem.
Okay, thank you very much, Tiana. So, Tiana, to you again. Often when I read or I see some news about blockchain, often I see blockchain associated with terms like a token, e-currency, and smart contract. What is the relationship between them and blockchain? What is the connection over there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. A lot of people use those terms interchangeably. I'm sort of I am probably a grammar Nazi in it, and it drives me totally nuts. And then sometimes I just have to let it go.
I agree. No worries.
What I like to think of as a cryptocurrency is it's issued by a public blockchain like BITKOM or Ethereum as a reward mechanism for its mining nodes, and that for me is a cryptocurrency. Tokens are there's basically kind of like, think of it as two different classes. There's a smart contract based token. So think of Ethereum, for example, where you can issue a smart contract that says that you've created X amount of Y, and that then generates this rare digital instance that you can then distribute. So one of the ways to be distinct about it is who issued it and why it was issued. So an algorithm that is rewarding miners versus a single individual that has created a thing is one of the distinct ways of like looking at that. There's also another class called colored coins, and that's simply just another way of organizing the same result, but they're done on different types of blockchains typically, and you're instead assigning a value to an existing cryptocurrency. Like existing cryptocurrency is one way to do it. And then there's also e-currencies or other types of things. So like World Bank and several other institutions are sort of like looking at creating purely digital currencies without any physical manifestation, and having that within a closed system. These don't use blockchains at all. There's a company called eCurrency out of California that's created some systems that have been tested by several of the big banks, and those are totally controlled within governments, and it's just a digital representation of money.
Thank you very much for your explanation, Tiana. Patrick, often also I hear about the term public ledger being often like a present on the blockchain explanations or presentations that I'm seeing worldwide. So why both terms are also often connected? Do you have any kind of example to illustrate why public ledger is part of blockchain or blockchain is part of public ledger? What is this?
I mean, yeah, sure. For example, in public blockchain networks such as Bitcoin, the information of Bitcoin transactions, the current status of the Bitcoin network is public. So everyone who wants to get some information on it, for example, the last block on which Bitcoin address sends some Bitcoins to someone else, can access that information. So in that sense, a public blockchain such as Bitcoin is a public ledger, since anybody can access the information through. I mean, there are some websites which offer that information, but basically the idea is that everyone can join the network as well. That everyone can get a blockchain, can become a blockchain node, for example, in the Bitcoin network, and then has the whole information. The whole information is public. That's, I guess, why people think of public ledgers and compare public ledgers to public blockchain networks.
Understand. Thank you very much, Patrick. Now, in the beginning of this presentation, on the introductional slides, we were talking about the integration of AI and IoT by calling it somehow blockchain complete. Is it possible that blockchain will work together with other technologies such as AI and IoT, Tiana? How do you see this?
Well, I can tell you for sure that blockchain's already working with IoT devices. That's some of the work that I was doing in 2015. So that's happening. The use case that I'm most familiar with is being able to secure the identity of these devices and allow them to communicate. I also looked at funding other projects, specifically like being able to have smart IoT devices be able to negotiate with each other and using their own sort of like as a cryptocurrency amongst themselves. So the use case that I liked best was think of self-driving cars. Each of those cars could communicate and identify each other using the network. And they could also then negotiate for like lane space using their own currency. So think of it as like a bunch of cars going down the highway, and then they could all decide to collaborate together to move together in a pack. Or you could test all different types of game theory around, 4 cars decide to block the highway and won't let anybody pass unless they pay them a toll. So I kind of liked that from the mind point of view, like thinking about that kind of problem. And the company that I funded was one that wanted to use commercial refrigeration and allow the commercial refrigeration to negotiate with one another to share resources like electricity. So refrigeration units could be pulling down electricity, but not need to like it would be able to keep its contents at the right temperature, but another unit would maybe need that electricity, and then they could negotiate with one another using their own currency to get access to that power so that they could turn on. So that was an interesting project that just didn't move fast enough, and we ended up shutting it down. But I think that those kind of things where there's an integration between a blockchain, IoT, and AI could be really interesting and game-changing as we look towards automation and the things in our lives doing more for us.
Oh, really nice. So then this means that probably in the future, our houses are going to be equipped like with devices with IoT, AI, and then also using blockchain together.
They could. I think that I don't fully understand all of those use cases yet. I think those are new business models that people will invent with need. I definitely see IoT as like they need to be able to secure their identity. So many of those devices have been hacked, and just sort of like horror stories of what has happened. So even DOS attacks where a bunch of like cameras or whatever are then harnessed to take down websites. You could start blocking that sort of activity if those devices were better secured.
Yeah, I can see. And that's why my next question is going to tap on this matter to Patrick. Patrick, how do you see that legislation like the European General Data Protection Regulation will be built by design into a blockchain? Is this going to happen? How do you see regulations like GDPR being applied in blockchain? Do you see some movement towards this direction?
Yeah, I would say there are some points where blockchain technology and the European General Data Protection Regulation have or could build some synergies, and But there are other points, of course, of the regulation which are really a barrier for blockchain adoption here, especially in Europe. I mean, first question is, I mean, how could this regulation, or how could blockchain help implement the regulation? There are some points, I would say, where blockchain could help, as far as data transactions on a blockchain could be more transparent, and consumers or already, I mean, they can see where their data is going. They can check where what their personal data is used for. It could also, through their blockchain identity, be better regulated on what kind of data is transmitted to different companies. I mean, I guess you have heard of zero knowledge proofs. The concept is basically that for some authentication processes, you only share exactly the data which is necessary to use some services, for example. I mean, for example, if you want to go into a club and you have to show that you're over 18 or 21, you share your whole identity card, and you share a lot of data which is not necessarily required by the club. And basically, in the future, it will be possible to either share only your age, technically, or even don't share any data at all, but only make sure in a trusted way that you are over 18 or 21 without even sharing your age. That's basically the concept. So I would say, as far as transactions and data flows and private data is concerned, blockchain could help. But in other aspects, the European regulation completely contradicts the concept of blockchain, since the European regulation, the whole concept of it is that there is one central responsible company or part that has to make sure that all these data protection measures are taken. So, for example, if I want to know from Facebook how my data is used, if I want Facebook to get it deleted, Facebook as central provider has to take care of it. But for decentralized networks such as Bitcoin, for example, who would then be the central authority who is in charge to get my data deleted, to tell me how my data is used, and so on and so forth. So on this central aspect of the regulation, at least decentralized and public networks completely contradict the European data protection regulations, since there's no central authority providing all these data protection measures for consumers. And this is, at least here in Germany and Europe, there's a lack of clarity, especially for public networks, on how public ledgers can be used with personal data. That's why most projects, blockchain projects, don't even use private data, but they only use company data, public data, and so on.
Well, really well explained, Patrick. Thank you very much for your answer. And now, I would like to see your bold vision on this matter, but we need to be briefly, really short in this answer, because we have more questions and we are running out of time now. So, Tiana, are there any ethical questions regarding blockchain?
Yeah, I think that ties really well into what Patrick just talked about, and it's basically at the root of how we use blockchain networks. Like, if you are publishing raw data right onto a blockchain, it's a distributed network, and it's pretty difficult to take that data down. Now, if you use it in a different kind of way, then it becomes really powerful. So back to that example I talked about again with the IoT devices. The government put out a call that I applied for, and what they wanted to do was basically be able to prove that they hadn't tampered with data. both internally and externally, because they were worried about, basically at an administrative level, you can change anything, right? And so how do you prove that you haven't? And so that was the concept behind what we ended up doing for those IoT devices, was being able to create unique, auditable, regulatory compliant digital identities that evolved over time. And one of the things you could do with that is that you could prove the negative. You could prove that nothing was missing from a data set. In the same sense, you could do that with regulatory compliance and being able to share data or not share data, or how that data was used. If you really, open your eyes and think about it in the really grand sense, like let's say Facebook, for example, was forced to use a totally blockchain compliant system where all of their interactions with data was recorded as transactions. Then you could automate regulatory compliance to see where and when or if they mishandled data, and you could do that proactively as it was happening. And I think that that's an interesting way of looking at blockchain technology, the ethics around it, and what's possible. It's not just always so clean cut. I think there's lots of different ways that we can structure these systems so that they are used as intended.
Thank you, Tiana. Patrick, do you would like to add up something on this question as well?
Yeah, I mean, the basic questions for future really public networks and public organizations running on public blockchains is basically on who will be responsible for actions taken by those networks or those decentralized organizations. And there are some ethical questions which have to be questioned. So, for example, if in a decentralized network a lot of money is lost through a code error, and the code is provided by the community, an individual who lost a lot of money has no way to to go to the legal system or to demand justice, and that those who did the code error will be taken into account. So basically, our whole legal and judiciary system is based on the idea that there's always one responsible actor and one actor that can be taken into justice, and this whole ethical idea has to be basically a question for the blockchain or for public systems.
That's very much true. To be really honest, I never thought about this. So as you were talking about that our system is based on someone's being the actor, it was really interesting because we always know about this, but we never noticed about this. But so I really adored. Thank you very much you both for both answers. I really enjoyed. But now I think it's the time that we need to move forward to the business side as well. So in your opinion, blockchain offers business risks? If so, which then are the most dangerous that must be mitigated once you are considering to move to use blockchain somehow? Patrick?
I would say that the most obvious business risk is the missing business model in many cases. I mean, I see a lot of companies only implementing blockchain projects because they're fancy and it helps them for their marketing and publicity. But that's really one decisive questions on how do I get money out of this, the implementation of this technology. And in a lot of cases, after proof of concepts, after some test phases, companies struggle to really show a viable business case for a blockchain project. And apart from that, I mean, of course, there are some regulatory risks that have to be mitigated. Some of the questions we already addressed. There are a lot of security issues which have to be taken into account on the security of the networks, especially for private companies. They don't necessarily want to share too much data. They want to make sure that the network is secure, and that's part of the major risks, I would say.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Corporations as well. I would like to move a bit more to the government and people. Tiana, do you see governments developing structures to support or to provide services to its citizens by using blockchain? I noticed some examples in the book that you wrote, the introduction of blockchain, that I really enjoyed the reading. So could you please answer this question?
Yeah, my pleasure. Yes and no. Probably some of the most surprising stuff I've seen is come out of China, who, the country has been hot and cold on blockchain technology, at one point imprisoning any person that was a blockchain executive. So that was kind of scary. And now I think they're looking at it as a really important part of their One Belt, One Road strategy, and issuing their own cryptocurrency, which would allow them to clear and settle financial transactions with all their different countries that they want to connect through their trade routes. And I think that that's really interesting, also kind of scary. And I've seen quite a lot of work with the public and private sector. So the World Economic Forum has put out some really interesting projects using blockchain technology. And so, yeah, I'm seeing those sort of things, but again, it's around like the use cases. I tend to be interested in software security and distributed networks for security purposes, because I think like that's a really easy to understand business model. It allows you to do software as a service. Some of these other things could come up into the economy, sort of like, I hate to use the term, but sort of like Uber, where all of a sudden all the right elements were in place to allow for a whole new business model. The largest cab company in the world, and it doesn't own any cabs. And that was all possible because almost everyone has a smartphone and has the ability to pay through their phone. And so I think we'll see those kind of transformations all over the place. And one of the ones I'd love to see would be voting, the ability to authenticate yourself and vote on your smartphone. And I think that that blockchain technology would allow that to happen.
Then maybe we're going to have a massive people like interested in the voting as well. So really nice examples, Tiana. Thank you very much. Patrick, do you see any other movement from the government in Germany or in Europe towards providing services by using blockchain?
Yeah, there are a lot of different initiatives in the public space as well, especially on the European level. There's what is called the European Blockchain Services Infrastructure. Is basically the project is to really create one public permissioned European network of all the different 27, 28 European states, where every state is running one node on the network, and where on top of this network, on top of this blockchain layer, then can be built different public use cases, such as, for example, the validation of different certificates, such as diplomas and everything. It's a big struggle here in Europe when you travel to another country and you have to make sure that your diploma is is valued the same way it is valued in your country. Of course, identity on a blockchain is especially on a European level could be very useful. I think the fragmentation of the different European states would make a blockchain network on a European level really useful. for different kind of use cases. And as many other nations, of course, in Europe, the European Central Bank is also reflecting about issuing a digital euro, possibly on the blockchain. So there are loads of possible use cases which are discussed on the European level. But I would say it's probably, I mean, I know no other infrastructure project such as this European blockchain infrastructure, which is currently pursued by any other continent or nation.
Okay, thank you very much, Patrick. Really well explained. And now we are approaching the last question. And then I would like to see both of your vision on this, because we received many of the questions that we were receiving along the panel. You were tackling during the questions, so I didn't stop to read the questions to you because for sure I knew that you were like tackling the questions. But one of the questions that we received, like many questions about this on the questions tab over there, is about the future for the professionals. Which kind of competences or knowledge will be most needed in the near future with blockchain, or which kind of roles it's going to be created around blockchain? Tiana.
The projects that I'm most interested in as an investor are business models that make sense. So I'm looking for companies that want to create the Uber-esque kind of game-changing applications. But one of them was in finance and being able to legally, globally trade securities. We were able to see how that model worked with cryptocurrencies and tokens, and then being able to apply that within stocks and bonds for companies and take account of those efficiencies. So I love those kind of projects, and I think that there's a lot of opportunity in that. I think there's a lot of opportunity also in how do we create systems, like let's say a government's going to use a blockchain and they already have, you know, potentially hundreds of years of legal regulation and precedents. How do you translate that into code so that these systems can start to automate what each of these jurisdictions, I mean, the economic burden of justice is pretty heavy, and I'm for people being able to have recourse, of course, but is there a way that we could lighten that load and make things work efficiently with what we already have? So I think that there's a tremendous potential for that. And then of course within systems, how do we create more secure open systems? I believe that we're moving more and more towards globalization, and so how, like, I'm a millennial, and I don't have the same kind of like thoughts around citizenship and location as other people. I've lived in South America and Central America, Asia. I lived in France. And so I find that I want to be able to transfer and live and cooperate globally. And I don't think that that's unique. So how do we enable that kind of behavior so that people can move around freely and safely?
Wow, I truly understand what we're talking about, especially because only between us, we are talking about Germany, we're talking about USA, and we're talking about Netherlands, only in just one conference. And many of our audience, they are from different countries. So how to bring all these people together with different competencies and need for the future? I can truly understand you, Tiana. Thank you very much for your answer. Patrick, what is your view on this?
Yeah, I guess, yeah, it's basically just, I would like to add that there's a huge demand of companies for blockchain specialists, for blockchain experts on the technical side, of course, for IT developers, for network specialists, on the business side, as mentioned, like for people developing strategies for business case that makes sense. And also on the law side, I would say, especially in public institutions, there are many questions which will be raised once more and more decentralized systems will be in place, that put into question a lot of our understanding of law and that we have right now. And I think it would be great to have more and more also public servants and law experts, political experts, which really know what they're talking about, so that they can implement a system, a regulatory system, which would enable this whole technology revolution.
Okay, so as far as I could capture both of your view on this, so I would say that which competences or knowledge will be most needed in the near future for blockchain? Basically, we need to understand a little bit of the laws that it's going to govern the countries or the places that we are willing to work. We are going to need infrastructure knowledge to set up the environments and then also to control the servers that is being used in operational systems. Information security becomes crucial because I think this is the base of the blockchain to provide security over there. The professionals, they need to have a global view on how to scale up services, not only towards their own territory, but thinking about even to cross the barriers of the countries. And also, of course, knowledge from blockchain itself and its main concepts, because otherwise we are not going to be able to bring all these other concepts together in order to create a solution to the business. And a business vision also is desirable because basically the solutions are mainly for the business, although people are also, there are many working for the public services as well. So am I correct on this list that I did? Because I just made this list right now as soon as you were talking. So am I correct on this?
Yes.
Yeah, sure. So. Yeah.
Oh. Okay. Well, it was really lovely to be with you both for these questions. Thank you very much, Patrick. Thank you very much, Tiana, to be with us. On behalf of EXIN, we are really pleased with the session, but please still bear with us. I'm going to briefly explain the certification models that EXIN developed, because EXIN developed the EXIN blockchain program that is also based on the book Introduction of Blockchain, written by Tiana, that was one of our speakers today. And then for the certification models, we have the EXIN Blockchain Foundation and the Blockchain Essentials. The main difference between them is the essential. We test the candidate understanding of the business value of cryptographic and smart solutions. Whilst the Blockchain Foundation, we test the candidate's ability to contribute to the business value of the cryptography and also smart solution. They are slightly different. I would say that for those that are willing to work with blockchain, the Blockchain Foundation is the one that you must seek for. And whilst the essential is designed for those that are going to use solutions based on blockchain, just to get the understanding about what blockchain is. Also, the EXIN blockchain is also part of the EXIN Career Path certification that EXIN also provided EXIN Digital Transformation Officer. That is composed by the EXIN Blockchain Foundation, Artificial Intelligence Foundation, Cloud Computing Foundation, and Verizon Professional. So once you achieved these four certification models, you are going to receive the most, how can I say, not important, but prestigious, yes, that's prestigious certificate from EXIN that is called EXIN Digital Transformation Officer, that will prepare the professionals to achieve the most at their business and then at their organizations by having not only one technology knowledge, but it's more broader because it's going to cover blockchain, AI, cloud computing, and also the service management at the digital age. So if you are interested on this certification, please access the EXIN website, career path, EXIN Digital Transformation Officer, and then please seek for the information over there. And I told you since the beginning of this presentation that we are going to have a surprise to you. Yes, we do. So we are going to launch, just as I speak, the EXIN blockchain quiz. The 5 people who score the highest score will receive a voucher for the free exam of Blockchain Foundation. So in case there are more people with the 5 score, so then the winner will be decided based on the first submissions. So you need to be fast and you need to be bold on this. So the link is available over here on my slide, but also in the tab chat, you can copy and paste the link as well. I made it easy to you since the beginning. So again, before we go, I would like to say again, thank you, Tiana. Thank you, Patrick. It was a pleasure to be with you. So if you'd like to say something to the audience, please.
Thank you very much for having me, and thanks all for listening. It was a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Tiana?
No, that was it. Thank you, guys.
Okay. Thank you very much and enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.